other area that if you are considering sort of embarking on being a competitive bodybuilder in the latter part of your life as a masters, obviously considering how one's body changes as you get older. So if you are a masters athlete, you know, you're likely, as a female, probably perimenopausal or menopausal. Hormones are changing. Your health implications may be there, whatever they may be. There's a raft of things to consider as you get older that certainly wouldn't have been part of the equation as a younger athlete. So those are to be taken into account. Now, if you are just starting out, and let's say you're 50 plus, you already will have experienced, by virtue, certainly, if you are not from an athletic background previously, you will have already had a great deal of atrophy to your muscles. So starting from ground zero is, putting it mildly, it's going to be harder to achieve muscle growth, tissue growth. It's going to be harder to achieve many things, to do many things, the older you get. So just bear that in mind. And what you do and how you do it will be conversations between yourself and your coach. And female and male masters athletes, please consider really high-end coaches that are particularly specialising in dealing with masters athletes and hormones. And if actually I can be of any assistance in recommending those that I know to be exceptional in that field, do let me know. I am not a prep coach, nor do I have the desire to ever be, but I know the best in the business, and I think that is critical as a masters. Now, the other thing is agility and mobility. Again, something that often can be greatly affected, again, if you don't come from a sporting background, perhaps. The older one gets, you can be stiff as cardboard, you know, and that'll affect your presence on stage. You know, you a good way to think about being on stage is almost like a performance art. You spend your entire time building the best physique you can, but how you best present it and demonstrate it on stage is everything. If you can have the most incredible physique, but if you have zero ability to demonstrate it in its optimum form, it will cost you. Now, we can talk about posing. I don't think I need to. I think it's self-explanatory. We need to be posing and posing beautifully. However, for masters athletes, we also have the matter of agility and mobility, which is greatly affected. Focus on being more mobile, more mobility exercises, being agile and mobile on stage. Certainly, you know, on any level actually is critical. More so if you are a figure athlete. You know, some federations require you to do an individual routine. That will require a great deal of agility and mobility. You don't want to look like cardboard or robotic on stage because you don't have the ability to move. You know, we can get stiff enough as it is weight training. Let's not carry that into our performance. So age will have a factor on that, focus on that. And lastly, I think of that trilogy of things to discuss is whether one is assisted or natural. I don't want to focus on this in an inappropriate fashion. However, if one is starting out, again, latter years, you could be 50 something, 40 something, 60 something, and just embarking on this journey, and you're natural, why wouldn't you be? And by natural, I mean you might be on HRT prescription, but let's park that for a minute, i.e. you would not be on anabolic steroids or any other assistance. You know, that too will have an effect on what kind of package you're bringing to the table latter years, because again, you will have experienced a great deal of atrophy by virtue of aging, the way of the world, the way of biology. So just bear that in mind. And earlier I discussed, mentioned sort of masters staying in their lane, as it were, in terms of age, but also in terms of whether one is natural or assisted. I think it's never more prevalent than when you are older and bringing a package to stage. So all of those things, I think, are critical factors to consider. So at any age, although I focus on masters, but at any age, all serious athletes have the desire to turn pro if indeed they are serious and want to progress their sport. Now, turning pro and being a pro is two very different things. You know, we can do pro qualifiers and you can turn pro. Great. Fantastic. Step one achieved. But you kind of turn pro based on the lineup that day. You could be, and I'm just broad spectrum speaking bluntly, you could be a mediocre athlete, but the best mediocre athlete on the day, and by virtue get a pro card. Fine. Does that mean that you're automatically a competitive pro? Absolutely not. And also, does being a pro begin and end at the physique? Absolutely not. And what I mean by that is, yes, I'm an amateur athlete with a desire to turn pro, and I have further goals beyond that. Now, sure, I've wanted to turn pro since I was 20 years old. But I don't want to turn pro until I'm deserving of turning pro. I don't want to prematurely turn pro and not be able to hold my own as a pro entry level day one. Because as much as turning pro as an amateur puts you at the top of the amateur food chain, it equally puts you at the very bottom of the pro food chain. I want to have a decent entry level pro status, certainly as a masters, so that I can be truly competitive and really get to be a force to be reckoned with as a masters pro. So in that aspect, turning pro, being pro, two different things. Again, I'll say, don't rush. Don't rush. You want to earn your pro status rightfully. You want it to be earned, not given, right? Like you want to make sure you're competitive, that you're at the right place when you turn pro. And for a large number of you, it is not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Let's just get it right. Now, that then leads me on to attitude. because who you are as an athlete is everything to whether you are, in fact, deserving of being held with respect and regard. Turning pro comes with great responsibility. You're a role model as an athlete as it is, let alone as a pro. You're a role model, an advocate for the sport, an ambassador for bodybuilding, for competitive bodybuilding, for the federations, and a large number of you, myself included, for your sponsors. Now, you cannot have a poor attitude. Absolutely not. Being a pro, being an athlete, being a pro athlete requires you to have integrity, respect, compassion, traits that absolutely are to be respected and revered, not to have a poor attitude towards any of your colleagues, certainly, absolutely not towards the industry. Now, I realise this has got absolutely nothing to do with being a masters athlete. That element stands on its own, regardless of what age you are. However, I find that there is somewhat, and maybe this is truly just because of age for most, but amongst the masters community, an air of urgency and entitlement. Sometimes, no, just no. So we must at all times be respectful, understand who we are, what we represent, what we're bringing to the table, the bigger picture, and do the best, absolute best we can to support, to give back, to remain humble at all times. The end.